Welcome to the Team EF Coaching Performance Podcast, where we take information from the highest level of sport and make it accessible for all cyclists. I'm your host, Zack Morris, and in this episode, I have the founder of a fast-growing nutrition brand in the endurance sports industry called Neversecond. With me today is Mr. Bill Armstrong. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Zach.
So, Bill, I'm a huge fan of the Neversecond products myself. I use them every single day in my training, and I actually don't know much about the brand myself and you and the people behind the brand. So I thought it would be pretty cool if I could just get a little bit of a background on you, since you're the founder, and how Neversecond got started.
Well, thanks so much for asking and for having us on. My background prior to Neversecond, athletically speaking, was as a runner. Before I started Neversecond, my first company was a product development company that I started with my wife back in 2000. We sold that business back in 2018 and started Neversecond after about a year or two hiatus. When I first started Neversecond, I reached out to some friends in the space, talking about, are there potentially different needs within the performance nutrition space? At that point, what I was really trying to do was to combine my experience as a product developer, that was my past life, with working with endurance athletes, which is where my passion is. Shortly afterwards, I was put in touch with Dr. Oscar Yeukendrup. He was described to me by the friend who introduced us as the Pope of sports nutrition. As I started to speak to Oscar more and more, I realized that he truly was the pivotal in the establishment of gold standard fueling for endurance athletes. So that was really the beginning of the brand. We've been, launched in July 2021, and things have been very exciting and fast growing ever since.
So what kind of products did you create in the past?
Oh gosh, we worked with global consumer product companies. So everyone from your Unilevers and Procter & Gamble's down to startups. We worked on products primarily topical. So we worked within health, wellness, beauty, personal care products primarily.
Okay, that explains the good branding, because it's very rare a new company comes out and I'm like, oh, hey, good branding. I like the way that all looks right away, first year, So
Thanks.
So that explains that part of it. So tell me a little bit more about how you got hooked up with Oscar, because I do agree with you. I'm a huge fan of Oscar. I think he is the leader in sports nutrition in our industry. He's somebody we all look up to. So how did you get hooked up with him?
So early on, I was introduced to a gentleman named Zibby Slupchik, who is very well known in the triathlon space. And early on, we were evaluating different scientists we can work with. Zibby immediately recommended Oscar, and we had conversations, and it was very clear that Oscar was the right person to work with. So at the time, I didn't really know who he was. But a little bit of research showed me that he was definitely the right partner to have at the business. Especially since, early on, one of the things we were trying to do was to decide, in that pivotal question that all branding folks have to ask themselves: is there space for us in this arena? I mean, at that point, I looked around. I'm old enough to have remembered Power Bar in the States and Cliff Bar and a lot of the brands that have coming on. There are a lot of brands in the market today. And the first question I asked Oscar was, is there space for us? And he said, look, for the past 25 years I've been in this, and athletes continue to make a lot of mistakes with their fueling, primarily because, one, they're relatively confused by the brand marketers who are constantly launching products that just don't make a lot of sense. A lot of them are built on improper compositions. And then they're sold on these ingredients and blends and things that don't really help them. And so the athletes oftentimes get really confused. And then there's really no blueprint for success. And so Oscar said, look, there's definitely, we do a few things. There's definitely, we give athletes a blueprint for success. We build products using a common composition. We can help athletes feel better, not just sell them products, but actually help them feel better.
That's fascinating. I think that that initial concept has absolutely resonated to the way I received the brand today, and also the way I introduce people to the brand. Um, of course, in our coaching company, we have a lot of people ask us every single day about nutrition, and I always tell them, and just so you guys know, this episode is not sponsored by Neversecond. I always tell them Neversecond, and the main reason for that is how simple you guys have made it to get your nutrition right. I had a conversation with our nutritionist from the team, Will Gerling, on the podcast, and we talked about how simple it is to just keep track of 30 and 90 gram servings, whereas a lot of other brands out there, they got 26 grams in one product, 34 grams in another, and you're out there riding threshold, trying to do math equations, and you think you're doing all right, but you're never sure. And so with Neversecond, it's really easy to keep track of. So that's cool. That's the concept you guys came up with, and it's gone all the way through now to international markets. You guys are distributed now in how many countries, Bill?
Roughly 40 right now, since we've launched. I mean, we came into the brand with, I think, a pretty aggressive launch strategy. And so we entered Europe, US, and UK, and some Southeast Asia, Latin America, all at the same time, which was probably not the easiest path, but it's something that we definitely believe in. Long term is the right strategy. Yeah, and that's the message that's really resonated with athletes. To your point, is that we've made it a lot easier for them. A lot of athletes, when I first started working and receiving phone calls from athletes, a lot of them would say, "Hey, I'm wondering when my Neversecond product supply is going to come," and we realized they never bought from us before. So there's this kind of confusion out in the marketplace that performance nutrition is like for race day only or something. And what we've really tried to do with our blueprint for success is to help athletes train their gut so that they have, well, first of all, they have better training sessions, can make marginal gains during training, uh, optimize their training, recover better, perform better. And then on race day, we are looking to ultimately remove the question marks about fueling protocol, to remove it, because the athlete has hopefully used the performance in training, and therefore on race day they're just doing what they already know works.
Yeah. So for me, I think that I've said this maybe a couple of times now. I'm not sure if I've said it on the podcast, but I think the biggest change in the level of pressure athletes are able to compete with throughout the duration of an entire event today, the single biggest factor that has made that change is nutrition. And I've seen the full spectrum on my end back in the day when I was racing on a European team as a 19-year-old kid. The protocol was ride 5 hours, don't eat anything. And if you feel good at any point throughout the ride, you're doing it all wrong. And now I'm on the other side where it's like, dude, if I don't get my 90 grams of carbs an hour while I'm out there training, I'm a miserable, grumpy old man. So I I I am so appreciative for all of the science and regular available information that has come forward, and that's why I'm so passionate about extending a lot of what is your guys' message as well, and that's getting people on the right track. So when you guys started this company, was that one of the core things you had set out to do, is to get people to stop just buying gels on race day and just try to fuel up and start to teach them how to train their gut, how to build up tolerance to be able to consume more carbs, and not just consume more, carbs while they're out there, but actually train their body to convert it to glycogen while they're out there training. Is that something you guys kind of strategized in the initial concepts of creating the brand?
Yeah, I think one of the really important, I guess, purposes of Neversecond is to educate as much as sell. And I think that that's one. one thing that we had noticed when we first started working with athletes is they're quite resistant because the reality is that athletes are consumers, and consumers are used to brands over communicating with them, trying to get them to buy things they don't need. And so when yes, we're a for-profit business for sure, but I think we do see it as a necessary part of our mission, especially because of our relationship with Oscar, to help educate as much as provide a product solution. And so for us, that's something. If you go to our website or you look at our communications, it's definitely skewed towards high level education because we think that an informed consumer is someone that is using our products for the right reasons. I mean, fundamentally, whenever we start working with a new athlete or team, any of our sponsored athletes, it's also pivotal that we uh, give them access to webinars and education so that they aren't just taking products and taking it our word at face value, but they're also understanding why they should take them and how to optimize how they take them. That's one of the things we always say. It's not just about what you take, but when you take it and how you take it. And so that's, I think, really an important part of the mission, Neversecond.
I think you touched on a very sensitive point for me there, and that is that, brands, especially in this industry, but I mean, every industry, Bill, let's be honest, every industry,
Yeah.
brands are just pushing products on people all day, every day. And yeah, a lot of our consumers have become desensitized to that. But it's not just the consumers, it's actually the pro athletes as well. I did a training camp with Annemiek van Vleuten down here in Medellin this year. We did an altitude camp together, and yeah, I'm not throwing Annemiek under the bus at all, but it's amazing that an athlete who has won the Giro d'Italia, Vuelta a España, Tour de France, World Championships, all the biggest races that you can win as an athlete, is still overcoming some of those, what I would consider initial nutritional challenges mentally, right? Understanding that you have really no choice but to fuel your effort if you want to perform your best at the end of an event. It's not necessarily about just getting carbs in the last hour because now it really counts. It's about a performance, from the start of the week to the last kilometer on race day in many cases. And so I think that a lot of this numbing that the brands have instilled in the consumers has really impacted in a negative way the performance of athletes overall. So I guess my question to you is, how do we overcome that?
I think it's a long road. We're definitely here on a long game because I think it takes a while for athletes to unilaterally recognize sea change and how and right now, um, I mean, we work with a number of professional athletes. Some of them are amazing in terms of their adoption of protocol. Like we work with in the United States, three of my favorite athletes are Keegan Swenson, Sevilla Villavon, and Russell Finsterwall. These athletes understand and implement top level protocol. They really are highly technical athletes. There are others that are more resistant. I mean, as a runner, I can tell you that and many endurance athletes, being masochists, believe if they just train harder and suffer more, they're going to do better. But Oscar said something to me really early on that resonated. He said, "Nutrition is the easiest way for you to improve your performance without actually having to train for it." And by that, there's minimal training. There's gut training that should be done to optimize, but it's something that if we can just over the long haul get the message across. And I do think that there are right now a lot of the brands are starting to take note of what we're doing, and they're starting to at least communicate the right way. And so I think it's going to take a few more years for there to be more unilateral adoption across the industry. But I do think that it's definitely been a slow moving train. But we do see that there is definitely a wider understanding across the board with endurance athletes about the importance. They're seeing these top level athletes perform at an unbelievable level and very consistently, and that's, I think, they'll start to take notice. So I think between our communication, other brands communicating, top level athletes who are doing really well communicating, that tends to trickle down.
So I have a little bit of a different perspective on that. And I think what I've noticed is that one of the biggest disconnects is between people who do the sport recreationally and their relationship with pro riders is that they do not see themselves anywhere worthy of what pro riders do on a day-to-day basis. And so I see this as a fundamental problem when it comes to nutrition. It's different when it comes to buying nice bikes and riding the best stuff because everybody wants to have just the nicest shoes, the nicest shirts. And the bike's kind of like in that category. We all like nice shiny things, right? So
Yeah.
you'll get the best bike. But what happens is they don't feel like they work hard enough to fuel like the pros, and they think that the pros are actually uh, in a totally different category when it comes to all of these more, technical things in terms of nutrition. And I also see it on the training side. And so I always say this to people, I'm using myself as an example a lot this year because I did this like big transformation where I wasn't riding for like 5, 6 months. And then I got back on the bike. And in 16 weeks, I lost 14 kilos. And I tell people all the time, I said, there wasn't a single ride where I didn't have 90 grams of carbs an hour. You don't underfuel the work that you're doing. You lose the weight or you optimize the body composition outside of training. But if you want to actually optimize body composition and increase performance at the same time, which you very much can do, there's a big misconception out there that you can't lose weight and increase performance at the same time. But I'm telling you right now that you absolutely can. And the only way to do that is to fuel your efforts on the bike. So I think if more people understood that, regardless of your level, regardless of whether you aspire to be a pro or you just want to beat your friends on the town line sprint, fueling for your ride will make a massive difference, like Mr. Oscar said, right?
I can't agree more. It's fantastic. What you're saying is absolutely the truth, and it's something that we have seen a lot of, even at the professional level. A lot of athletes are resistant to or tend to underfuel, which is unfortunate because they do see it as part of weight management. They kind of connect the two, which is unfortunate. But generally speaking, our advice would be right if you're looking to add your composition, it shouldn't be during training. You do need to fuel your sessions correctly, and that's something that we definitely endorse and recommend.
So we know why Neversecond exists. We love it. Now let's talk about some of the products. Yeah, I love why you guys entered the market. You wanted to make a difference. You wanted to educate athletes. But what makes aside from the serving values, what makes the products different?
Well, I think the one thing that we tell people, and I think it really is very true, is most brands are developing products as standalone. Typically, a marketer will say, "Okay, let's launch a gel. Okay, and what will the composition be? Okay, that tastes good," and they put it out into the market as a standalone. Some are better than others, for sure. Neversecond's products are really developed as a system. And that's important because if the foundation's right from the beginning, it's easy to really build something that athletes can learn from, benefit from, and understand. And so initially, that was the most important thing was the communication. All the products had to have the same composition of 2-to-1 glucose to fructose, so that they could be mixed and matched, combined with a reduced risk of uh, gastric issues, and at the same time delivering a very high oxidation rates. They all needed to be built on 30-gram increments of carbohydrate. Again, as you had mentioned earlier, that they could be, it would make it easier for athletes to calculate, train, and perfect how they do their fueling. It was also important for us to develop the system where we provide a wide variety of texture and flavor. One of the things we kept hearing from a lot of the world tour teams was, flavor fatigue is a real thing. You can't just have one gel flavor or two gel flavors. You have to offer variety because, for athletes that are consuming products day in and day out, flavor and the quality of life it does matter. And so that was important for us. So initially, we launched our drink mixes, the C30 sports drink mix, 30 grams of carbohydrate. Our C30 gels we launched with initially. Since then, we've launched our high carb drink mix, our C90, which has become a real staple for a lot of endurance athletes. Currently, we are now at finalizing kind of this assortment between drinks, gels, and solids by launching our C30 Fuel Bar. That's launching actually right now, globally in Europe, UK, and US and global markets. We're also starting to look at introducing some innovation type products that can offer some unique um, advantages. Our C30 Ice Gel is launching in about 20 days, and that's again a 30-gram, 2-to-1 composition fueling product that offers some cooling benefits in addition to the energy benefits for athletes.
Okay, that's awesome. Let's jump into this a little bit deeper. So I'm a huge fan of the
Okay.
system. I'm so grateful that you guys have created a system because nutrition has always been a system. We've just had to put the puzzle together on our own until you guys came around. So I'm so grateful, and it makes it so much
Thanks.
easier for me as somebody who builds systems for our coaching business for our coaches to use. As a system builder myself, I love how easy it is to share this system with my athletes. So talk to me a little bit about this 2-to-1 ratio. Why does this matter?
So well, it since the beginning of guess since the 1990s when Oscar started doing research into which carbohydrate blends delivered the highest oxidation rates. That is the fundamental challenge for performance fueling brands is to deliver the highest amount of energy to athletes with the least potential for getting an athlete sick. During Oscar's tests, he is one of the pivotal scientists who ran these tests to determine which carbohydrate blend was the most effective, and he would grade that as an efficiency. The goal again, the efficiency is delivering the highest oxidation rates to muscles with the least potential for getting an athlete sick. That's the challenge. And so, at the time, 2-to-1 maltodextrin to fructose and glucose to fructose compositions tended to perform the best. And they really are still today the gold standard for endurance fueling, and that's fundamentally the composition of all of our products. I think the other thing that's important to mention is mixing different compositions uh, in the stomach. Imagine you're an athlete, you're taking in drinks and gels and bars. If you're starting to take in products that use different compositions, the ratios aren't the same anymore. And so that was another really important part of building the Neversecond portfolio of products is that the compositions all had to be the same. And so that hopefully answers your question.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, and that's why the system makes sense. Athletes are like I like this gel from this brand and this drink mix from this brand, and what ends up happening is their stomachs literally explode while they're out there because your body can just not handle that much inconsistency and that much. Just think of it as like internal disruption. You're just creating all kinds of chaos in your digestive tract. So it's just so much easier to give your body the same thing day in, day out, and let it become more and more efficient at processing it and using it as fuel. So that's really cool. Now, another thing that I wanted to ask you is why a bar? Why do we need a solid? What's the benefit of that?
Well, that's a great question. I think since the beginning, it's always been very important for us to offer athletes a variety of flavor and texture. Bars have always been in our crosshairs as something we needed to and wanted to launch because the reality is some athletes have preferences. There's also the reality of practicality. When you're in a race scenario, a bar may be impossible to consume. So when one athlete, for instance, they may not even have time to fumble with a wrapper, so they may opt towards liquid fuel. But there are also athletes who really, we work with, for instance, a lot of ultra distance runners who might be out on a 24-hour race. They need to eat something. And the goal that there then with a solid product like our C30 fuel bar is to deliver the 30 grams of carbohydrate and to do it in such a way that we keep the risk of gastric distress as low as possible. We also looked at the bar market. Um, it's probably, well, I guess there are a lot of bars out in the market that present as performance bars, but which tend to really be more of a lifestyle bar. And so we felt there was a real need to launch something that is a bar that is a true performance bar
Okay.
that is comes from listening to athletes. Like, what do they want? What is going to work best for them? So that's really how the story, the backstory behind how we built our C30 fuel bar. Um, Now that our C30 fuel bar is launching, we're super excited about it in terms of its composition. As I mentioned earlier, it's 2-to-1 glucose fructose. But beyond that, all of the small attributes, the details matter. And so, for instance, we thought about what is the size of the bar? What's an appropriate size? How should it be to chew and swallow? So ours is, for instance, a very smooth texture and easy to swallow. These sorts of considerations, I think, are what make the difference between an average or lifestyle type bar and something that is relevant for a performance athlete.
That's cool that you guys kept kept you stayed in line with the initial mission, right? I get so many DMs and so many like even local people coming up with their new bar and their new nutrition stuff and all this, and I'm like, what am I gonna do with that? You've got like 4 grams of fiber in this bar and like 8 grams of fat. Like I don't have a place for that because of the way I train. I like to train really hard, and personally, I don't eat any bars. I'm carb mix and gels. I'm out there for 4, 5, 6 hours, carb mix and gels. I'm good to go. I don't need anything else. But I do see that the lifestyle bar, what was designed to be a lifestyle bar, designed to be a snack while you're stuck in traffic on the highway, has definitely made its way into like this, sports performance space. And it's so strange for me. I see people literally at like the top of a climb, getting ready to descend and go into another climb, like eating a grainy oat bar. And I'm sitting there going like, why? You're gonna feel like crap. So it's interesting. It's interesting that you guys created that, and I'm definitely excited to try it. When's that gonna be available?
It's actually launching any day. We're just waiting for final approvals, but the batches are right now waiting to ship from the U.S. as well as Europe. So any day now, it's something we're really excited about. We did a lot of tests on this bar, and that's you mentioned the fat and the fiber and protein. Those are fundamentally, I guess, called the enemies of absorption. And so the goal when you're building a bar is to have as little fat, fiber, and protein in the bar, assuming it's an energy bar, as few of those elements as possible in the bar. It's a challenge because you still have to deliver a palatable bar that people actually want to eat, and so that's the challenge. But I think we've done a really good job. I'm super excited to see. We definitely have some feedback from professional teams as well as professional athletes. It's been unilaterally fantastic. So we're really excited to bring this product to the consumer market.
Cool. I want to ask you about one more product, and I've got a couple of more general questions for you. But
Of course.
the ice gel. I saw this and I immediately thought to myself, okay, if I watched the Tour de France last year, I can think of one team in particular who was handing out ice and ice bottles and ice bags and were so focused on bringing down core body temperature at every possible turn they could possibly get. They ended up winning the Tour de France, but it was fascinating for me to see how much effort they put into regulating that body temperature. Does this ice gel have the potential to reduce core body temperature in any way?
We hope so. I mean, in a world of marginal gains, that's the plan with the ice gel. I think that when we're talking about heat relief, there's the reality of cooling body temperature, and then there's also the psychological or mental advantage of having something cold during a hot effort. We used the ice gels extensively last year at the Tour de France with a few of the professional teams, and the ones that had a limited supply were upset. They wanted more of them, and so it really started the wheels working for us after the tour to figure out how we could bring this to a consumer market. There were definitely some flaws in the product last year during the tour. It was very hard to open, and so we worked to resolve those issues. And I mean, then we also had to think, like, for instance, okay, we were using this with professional athletes. How do we bring this to a more mainstream audience when it has to be chilled? And what are the uses and benefits to the amateur and the prosumer type of athlete? And so I think we've got a real exciting product coming. There's a ton of interest from the consumer market. We're also looking at some of the less typical markets for it as well, ones that are non-endurance sports but field sports, where in the United States every year we have numerous athletes that have on-field heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and sometimes death that comes from overheating. So we do see that if we're able to offer a product that not only delivers energy, but which can also potentially bring down core temperature, it would be a win for the athlete and the teams.
Pretty cool. Can't wait. Can't
Thanks.
wait. So one of the big misconceptions in the nutrition space that I am seeing coming to the forefront and brands ready to take on this battle is electrolytes. Now, Neversecond is a pretty lean product on the electrolyte side, and I've read that there's good reason for that. So, what's your guys' stance on the electrolyte composition in your products and how it stacks up to maybe other brands in the industry?
That's a great question, Zach. Oscar and I have had a lot of conversations around electrolytes, and fundamentally, it's important to always look at what really matters in terms of focus. And we have a long history right now of brands starting, from the 1980s, starting to push electrolytes, and typically excessive amounts of electrolytes to athletes, and as well as consumers. I mean, there are brands right now that are uh, selling products that have copious amounts of sodium in them, and encouraging athletes and consumers to take them multiple times a day. Our position is that an athlete typically has sodium reserves. We have to build products um, that address the majority of athletes, and the majority of athletes are not heavy sodium sweaters. So all of our products are built on 200 milligrams of sodium per serving. Why do we choose 200? It's when we look at the average athlete, we look at the amount of average sodium depletion on an hourly basis. We look at an average duration of event, or exercise event or race. Um, we think that the 200 milligrams per serving is sufficient to deliver the needs for the majority of athletes. Um, there are cases, for instance, with long course athletes, when for instance, they may be heavy sodium sweaters, where then they may be competing in an event that might be multiple hours, 8, 10, 12 plus hours, where sodium depletion can start to become an issue. And so we encourage that athletes, of course, do sweat rate testing and sodium loss testing, and to become familiar with that. And the reality is, like, for instance, with our C90, we have some athletes that are taking one serving of C90 an hour. And if they take that for an 8 or 10-hour race, it may not be sufficient over the long haul if that's all they're taking. And so in those cases, they can always add a salt tack, for instance. But one reality that's important to mention is you can always add to a product,
Right.
but you really can't take it away. And we don't want to pre-build products that are based on high sodium intake for the sake of doing it. So yes, you're right in that Neversecond's products are all kind of built on delivering only what you need and nothing more than you need. So I hope that answers your question.
I love that. I think that it's a great idea to add to the product if you need to add to the product, but to have less in it, When it comes to electrolytes, I see so many people walking around with like their water bottle with like salt in it and like just electrolyting up. Just like just gotta get all my electrolytes out. It's like, man, if you just eat good food and salt your meals, like you're gonna be all right. Trust me, you're not doing 9-hour races. And I mean the athletes that are heavy sweaters or heavy salt sweaters, sorry, they know, right? Like you're covered in salt. You see the athletes that are covered in salt, right? And so if you are one of those, then add a salt tab. How much salt should somebody add in general if they are heavy sweaters?
I mean, it really depends. I mean, I was talking to two athletes on a webinar the other day. Each of them was like sweating 2 grams an hour, so their loss is tremendous.
Right.
And so, it's really hard to say. I mean, fundamentally, to your point, they usually know who they are, because they're covered in white usually when they're sweating, and so it's very hard for us to give stock advice on it.
Right.
But we definitely encourage that athletes evaluate it. It's important to note that for your average consumer, many of them are not out for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours at a clip.
No.
And it's also important to note that they have sodium reserves in their body. A lot of the brands that are pushing too much electrolyte consumption, I don't even know where they're getting their numbers from. I think that it's something that they're just like, it's kind of like, it's the same idea with vitamins. Taking copious amounts of something to kind of check a box isn't really the right way to approach it.
But the electrolytes for me, it like I said earlier, it just blows me away. How like people are just, dude, it's all about the electrolytes. They'll eat no carbs on a ride, but they'll have like the electrolytes. It's like, okay, well,
Zach, there are brands right now that are actually telling athletes to fuel. It says fuel on the package, and there's actually no carbohydrate in the product. It's an electrolyte product that they're calling fuel. I mean, if nothing else, then from a regulatory perspective, it's completely irresponsible. You're basically telling someone this is fuel, but it's not fuel at all. It's an electrolyte solution. And so it's something that consumers, I know that they're becoming more and more savvy and reading labels more carefully. And we've definitely seen that trend. But it's very disappointing that a lot of brands run around saying things that just are blatantly untrue. And unfortunately, it forces consumers to really have to be very careful about what they purchase and what they consume.
But I think we do need to be, I guess, honest or just real about one thing. And that is that in the sports nutrition space, we're climbing a big mountain, right? We're battling quite a few different pillars here. One of those pillars being that sugar is bad, right? Most people out there think that consuming products with a lot of sugar in it is bad. And my spiel on it is from a systemic health standpoint. When you look at an athlete's body that's under quite a bit of load, and you factor in the cost of breaking down different foods, does it make more sense for an athlete to let's go to an extreme here, like eat steak and potatoes while they're riding, or which is a very expensive, plate to break down, right? That would cost a lot of energy. You would send a lot of blood to your stomach. You'd spend so much energy breaking down that food. Of course, this is an exaggeration. Nobody's eating steak and potatoes while you're out at time, right? But would that be healthier, or would it be healthier to put something into the body since the body is under load, right? Would it be more healthy to put something that the body can just easily flow through its system, provide adequate energy to fuel the effort, and provide or cause, minimal disruption? So I think that's a big battle we're up against. And then the other battle is all of this health stuff, the general health products. I need my electrolytes. I need my vitamins. I need all these other things to be healthy. So where do you think we are in that battle, and what do you think the steps forward are?
Oh, that's a great question. Where are we in that? We do routinely see these questions from consumers, and unfortunately, there's a lot of there's only so much time that we can spend explaining to every consumer, what matters. But, the reality is with it on the fueling side of things, which is our entire C series product grouping, it's important to remember that they're supplements. They don't replace a healthy diet, right? And so it's meant for a certain time during training. It's not meant for it to like replace proper eating. And I think that's something that we're really spending a lot of time just trying to hit home with consumers. Um, I think that our mission is to bring this level of understanding to consumers. Uh, well, certainly not going to impact everyone. Some people just only have so much time, or will only listen to it, or they'll have their own opinions. I mean, for instance, we have athletes that will ask us why we're using maltodextrin and not maple syrup or honey because they're natural sources. And you can go down a long rabbit hole of explaining to them what a processed food is. The reality is every gel that they're taking is highly processed. Okay. And
I'm
just
so
because
glad you
something
brought this up.
sounds, okay, they talk about it as if like something that sounds natural, like honey or maple syrup, is better for you than maltodextrin and fructose. And it's not. Fundamentally, we always come down to science because that's something that we can always rely on. That's a single source of truth. It's really not, and that's a very safe and comfortable for a place for us to be because we're speaking the truth, and it's not with a lot of feelings. And a lot of times when we're talking about nutrition and health and wellness, it can go down to this use of words that are more around feelings, around natural or healthy. The reality is, we're in the business of building evidence-based products that are solely for supplement. Again, we certainly encourage during the normal course of the day, not during training, that you're eating a proper, well-balanced diet.
That's a good answer. So I'm on the extreme side. I love to debate and I love to challenge science. And I also love to test people's theories that they are highly passionate about. I did a 30-day trial where I just ate candies on my ride, just gummy bears. I said, okay, it's just sugar. That's all I need is sugar, right? And the
Yeah.
reality is, I could actually do pretty consistent rides, but my stomach was pretty upset throughout the remainder of the day, and it's tough to put 30 days together on candies while you're out there riding the entire time. Plus, flavor fatigue on candy is a real thing. You start to drop that next pack
Yeah.
of candy that you're gonna crack open. So that's one thing. But then there are other like healthy things that I've tried, like for example, coconut water. What a disaster. If you want to have an upset stomach, fuel your rides with coconut water. Go ahead, try it. I challenge anybody. I don't encourage anybody, but I will challenge anybody who wants to prove me wrong out there to go and try it. For me, I love to take these theories and try them and test them and give them an honest crack. And I always come back to, you know what? These products, maltodextrin, these products that are, seen as maybe unhealthy, they really work the best. And until something that, comes along that's better, and when I say better, comes back to your core principles, fuels, and provides the least, chance of an athlete getting sick, right? Until something comes along that can do a better job than that, I'm sticking to it. Sorry, hate to break it to you guys. Call me unhealthy, but I'm sticking to it.
You bring up a great point too, and in the evidence, even using evidence based is again a really comfortable place for us to come from. You know, give you one last example, which is very current, that we keep hearing about, and it comes down to ratios. As I think a good example of kind of misuse by a lot of the scientists in communicating with consumers, because consumers always want to, I think they always want to land at the best solution. And so it's very easy for brand marketers to use the words best, they'll use the word best to encourage a quick answer that isn't always the right answer. So for instance, we're seeing a lot of this push towards a 1 to 0.8 ratio. And we get asked by athletes, "Oh, is Neversecond using an old science because it's 2 to 1 versus 1 to 0.8?" And our answer to that is very simple. And unfortunately, it's not the kind of sexy quick answer. One is better than the other. It's this. It's that there is, based on the amount of carbohydrates you're taking in per hour, an optimal ratio. But that's purely from a theoretical perspective. So it is arguable that 1 to 0.8 might be better for someone who could take 150 grams of carbohydrates per hour, but at what risk? And
That's
so when we're building our products like the Neversecond products, it's about we're serving a very large athlete community. The vast majority of athletes can have a very hard time taking in 90 grams an hour. Even for a highly trained athlete who can get up to maybe 120 grams an hour, 2 to 1 is still an optimal choice for them. And then when you start, a lot of times we get athletes asking us and saying, "Look, I want to push up to 150 grams an hour." The first question we'll ask is, "Well, why? There's no award for carbohydrate consumption. So what's the value in what you're saying?" And so it comes down to really asking those questions about what are you trying to achieve and at what risk. Fundamentally, we do have athletes that take in 150 grams an hour. They're few and far between, and I certainly wouldn't recommend it for non-professional athletes. It's nothing that they should even be considering. And so that's, I think, just another really great example of where science can sometimes be misused, and the words can be the details and the words really matter.
I mean, just to think about the lifestyle that would support 150 grams of carbs an hour. I mean, it's just not a happy place to be. You've got to work out so hard. Like that's tough.
You do,
But
yes.
but the other thing too is like that study, there's one study that I know of that supports this ratio that you're talking about. And I think it has like 8 people in the trial group. So it's like, there's a study that supports this ratio, but it's on like a pretty small group of people that it worked out for. So we don't even really, in my opinion anyways, I don't know if we really know definitively that this other ratio is better. I've tried it, just to give you some feedback. Personally, it doesn't mix in my water bottle. That's a big factor for me. And I don't have as good of results over the course of a 5-hour ride as I do on a 2-to-1 ratio. So from the crazy guy that tries everything, that's my feedback.
Thanks for that. We definitely hear mixed reviews, and we also need to remember when we're making something for a large swath of people, a large group of people, you can't build something that's only for a very, very small group. And to your point about that study, is very limited in terms of the audience. And so what we try to do as a brand is to always look at multiple source studies so that the information is a confident advice. It's not built on one flimsy study. There's a lot of strong support for the messages we're putting out into the market. And I think that's for us really important, that we're responsible as a brand. That's hard to come by these days, and it's a hard path to walk to be really responsible. It's a hard thing to do.
It's so good to know because, like, I mean, who can keep track of all the brands that just grab a hold of, like you said, the newest, best thing, right? So it's great to know that you guys are, sticking to your roots and trying to create products that work and ultimately help athletes, get better. I think it's rare and hard, like you said, hard to come by in today's market.
It is. We're trying. Thank you so much.
Well, Bill, I know you are a busy guy and you got a lot to get to. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. It was so cool being able to get to know you, get to know more about, the story of Neversecond. And I'm a huge fan. So thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. And one carb serving at a time will change the world, my friend.
Thank you so much, Zach. I really appreciate you having me on and taking the time. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
All right, guys, if you want to learn more about Neversecond, head to neversecond.com. There'll be a link in the description of this episode. And if you want to get some one-on-one coaching advice, head to teamefcoaching.com. We'd love to help you no matter where you are in your cycling journey. We'd love to help you become a better athlete and learn more about the sport of cycling. That's it for this episode. be sure to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, do all that stuff that people ask you to do, because it actually helps the podcast grow. So we'll catch you on the next episode, guys. Take care.